Some of you may know that I work for the Finnish National Agency for Education. That's my professional environment, and there I'm mostly involved in Euroguidance network-related activities and developing the national guidance and counseling services together with various stakeholders. But here today, I'm mainly as a doctoral student. I have submitted my doctoral research to pre-examination some weeks ago, and now I'm waiting the reviewers to give me their feedback. And then probably around Christmas, I will then be working to finalize my doctoral thesis that I will be presenting and defending sometime early next year. So my presentation is based on my doctoral research to a certain extent. I will soon go into it. But as there are some concepts and notions that we often hear, I would like to pinpoint some aspects that may be of interest for you, because there seems to be a paradigm shift as regards multicultural, intercultural, cross-cultural, and also how we understand the notion of culture. Already here, during these 2 days, we have heard the word culture a couple of times, and then we easily associate it with our nation states, that there is a Czech culture, there is a Slovak culture, a Finnish culture, etc., etc. And we've taught that once we know the differences between different cultures, then it allows us to more easily interact with the representatives of other cultures. However, many researchers today suggest that we should forget about the notion of culture as we understand it from the previous times, and instead more and more focus on the individual. I would not like to see anybody define me through the Finnish culture. I might not be at all an average representative of the Finnish culture, if there even exists a Finnish culture, and none of you would be an average representative of your own national culture. So this is something I'm contesting here, that we should really start to be a little bit more flexible in terms of not trying to explain things and determine individuals through cultures. Secondly, the word multicultural. Even I have been using it earlier, and I'm still using it, but less and less. You've heard about multicultural guidance and counseling, for example, or that we talk about multicultural societies. The problem with multicultural as a concept is that, yes, we may have a society where we see multiple cultures, different representations, but they don't interact. They are not in contact between themselves. And what's the point of that? Nothing. We need interaction, communication, and so forth. So if we want to use something that would then improve this situation, then it could be intercultural or interculturality. Inter, as you know, means between. But if we already suggested that there are no cultures that would determine who we are, then this intercultural or interculturality gets a little bit problematic. So, talking to you guidance professionals, I would very much like to suggest that we start using inter-individuality, because the focus of your work is always on the individual. Do you agree or do you disagree? Okay. Maybe some food for thought. You don't need to buy what I'm trying to sell here. You may be critical, but this is something that I have discovered through my doctoral studies, becoming more familiar and acquainted with various concepts and how they are being used, and if they fit at all into the guidance and counseling field. And for the interpreters, is my speed okay? Yeah, okay, very good, thank you. Because I have the tendency to speak far too fast. So the title of my heading is global careers, identity formation, and interculturality development. Careers, yeah, they can be global, international, European. They can even be international if we work at home, in our own country. Those of us who work for European Union networks, we have international careers even though we stay in our own country. But in my presentation, this is really about mobility, going abroad for employment, for work. And I guess this well summarizes what has been discussed here specifically today and also yesterday, that in case we move around a little and leave our regular environment and explore something else, that then indeed we get some new ideas and impressions and impulses. Yeah, I don't mind you photographing these, but I guess these slides will be available to you later on after this conference, so there is no need necessarily to take any photos. And then something that has been puzzling me lately is, how do I see the role of a guidance counselor? I'm not saying that you look like chameleons, no. It's not necessarily the cutest animal on this planet, but it has some very special qualities. And I think that you as guidance practitioners also have the same qualities, or at least you should have. You should be extremely adaptable to the needs of your clients, to the demands of the context or situation. And therefore, you constantly need to rearrange yourselves in order to help the client as well as possible. So adjusting yourselves to the current context, current situation, and to the client's needs. This we've heard already, so I won't repeat it too much. Yes, the European Union is strongly promoting mobility and human development, capacity building, etc., etc. So this is nothing new to you, just getting repeated here. And my own background is that, yes, I've been mobile in my life. I was born to Finnish parents in Sweden. I lived there with my parents for 8 years. Then we moved to Finland, where I went to school. And then while I was studying at university, I had the opportunity to go on an exchange, a study exchange to Austria, to Vienna, which was a tremendous experience in many, many ways. And then through my adult years in working life, I've been to Denmark for a short period of employment, and then also 5 years in Greece. You might have heard about these European Union agencies that are located in the member states. So I was working for CEDEFOP for 5 years, and there I was in charge of lifelong guidance. And CEDEFOP is then closely cooperating with the European Commission, the European Parliament, and the member state representatives, or the ministry representatives mainly, and other key stakeholders. So once I returned to Finland after 5 years abroad and went back to my previous employer's service, I did not necessarily expect to be received with a red carpet. But I was, of course, hoping that my employer would be interested in what I had learned abroad. But they really didn't care much. And this was, of course, a very frustrating experience. So I started thinking that maybe I could launch some research here, as I had been talking to other people who had been abroad and then returned to their own country. And they had gone through similar experiences, that they had difficulties in settling in, finding a professional foothold again, and nobody showed any interest in their foreign experience, let's say. And so I started wondering that, okay, what happens to people who work for these European Union institutions or multinational organizations? What do they actually learn there? And so I started digging deeper, and I finally made a proposal to the University of Helsinki that, hey, I would like to learn more about the identities and intercultural capacities of people who work for these international institutions. Okay, I skip this one. We can only say that Europe is not as borderless as we wish it to be. But also the borders are human-made, so we can also abolish them if we so wish. Okay, I used this slide in a workshop, just mentioning this, that there are around 50,000 people working for the European Union institutions, which is already a little town somewhere in the Czech Republic or somewhere else in Europe. And out of them, some 30,000 are working for the European Commission. Then there are people working for the European Parliament, European Council, etc. And some 6,500 are working for more than 40 European Union agencies across Europe. So these European Union agencies in the member states are relatively small units mostly. And people often think that although those who work for the European institutions, of course they are well paid, but only around 6% of the annual total budget of the European Union goes into salaries and perks of those people working there. So the background of my research was that I wanted to interview staff members at 3 different locations. One was my previous employer, CEDEFOP. How many of you know about CEDEFOP? Yeah, it's the European Union Agency for Vocational Training. And then we have ETF, European Training Foundation, located in Italy, and Eurofound, which deals with working and living conditions and is located in Ireland. So altogether, I interviewed 20 staff members from all these 3 institutions. And as you can imagine, they can be categorized as a group of elitist and well-off people, well-educated, privileged in various ways, and many of them already had prior mobility experiences, either through their studies or prior employment abroad. And I wanted to understand how they create or develop their identity capital, or identity as a capital, that it becomes a developmental resource for them. The better they know themselves, or the better we know ourselves, the easier it is to function. And also the same about interculturality capital. How does it get created in an interactional and co-constructivist way? For those who work, these interviewees who I interviewed, these were the main motivations they expressed for giving the reasons why they work internationally. So yes, professional development, definitely. Many also said they were simply curious. I mean, how does the world look outside of their own country? And then many were really eager to work in a intercultural or multinational setting. So that gave them some additional flavor. And then also, as I pointed out, yes, the EU staff members, they are normally well paid. So having certain security, financial security, was part of their motivations. And as I have used capital to, how would I say, to cover different types of skills, competencies, expertise, know-how, etc. So I think you should just take a quick look at this visualization. I mean, it's not this model of intellectual capital, which is the basis. I mean, it's not created by me, but by some other researchers. And I used it as a framework for understanding what was happening in these EU institutions. So human capital, that's mostly the skills and competencies you have, that you possess and further develop those skills. Social capital, it's about how you utilize those skills through the relations and networks that you have. So networking is a topic at this event, so it's very important that you, as guidance professionals, utilize your social networks and expand them when need be. And organizational capital, that is something that the organization itself possesses, intellectual rights and procedures and systems like that. And then I wanted to insert identity, interculturality and career capitals into this model, and they mostly are about human capital and social capital. I skipped this one because we've been talking a lot about careers and career adaptability here. So you are very familiar with these concepts. And here I would like to draw your attention to the third bullet point, where the criteria of a self-initiated expatriate have been listed. So I was interested in studying those people who had taken the initiative to go abroad on their own. So they were not sent by any employer to work for those EU institutions, but they had taken the initiative themselves. And here are the criteria: so regular employment abroad, intentions of a temporary stay, so that probably you would return to your own country or move to the next country. And yes, usually you are expected to have solid basis of skills and competencies. And now, the next model that I will show you, I have tried to adapt it to the guidance context. The 6 types of knowing. I don't know if you are familiar with this career capital model. Have you heard about it? Some of you may have heard. And I think it works well to different purposes. And also, I have not really seen so much about that being discussed in the guidance context. Andreas Hirschi, for example, is one who has discussed it in the guidance context, but now I try to apply it a little bit, and I will briefly go through it. So the 6 types of knowing are there. Knowing why, that's about why do I do my work? Why have I chosen to work in this field or sector or profession? And it's about understanding your motivations, also doing some self-reflection, self-discovery, and meaning-making out of your daily work. Knowing how, that's again very much about the skills, the professional skills and competencies you have, and how you utilize them. And here, remember, these are not exhaustive descriptions or explanations, just highlighting some aspects that could eventually be linked to these given types of know-how or knowing. And then knowing whom, it's about networking. Who belong to my network? What do I give? What do I get back? How does that work? So being multi-sectorally, multi-professional, or cross-sectorally, multi-professionally networked is the key here. And knowing what, it's really about understanding and knowing the logics and dynamics of your own field. What you can expect, how you are supposed to work and function. So those are the things there. Knowing where, it's then more about your own professional development, where you can find professional opportunities for professional advancement, or how you can develop yourself professionally. And knowing when is then about when to take action. Is it short-term, more long-term? What is appropriate action? And all this, of course, being discussed in relation to your clients and the diversity of clients. So you definitely have so much expertise and experience already that everybody is an individual and they come with their different needs and expectations to discuss with you. So these aspects have been reflected here. Okay, I just went very quickly through this, but does it make any sense to you? Do you think that you could sort of utilize this model for analyzing your own professional current situation? Let's say, where do I stand as a professional? In which areas should I improve? Is it that I should develop my networks more, or should I acquire new competencies and skills in order to work better with certain types of clients or certain client groups? So there are many things that you can think through with this model. But then, identifications and belongings. So, how would I say? Even identities, or the identity that we think we have, it's not stable. It's constantly changing, evolving, and also now that the world is being more and more dynamic, turbulent, etc., it affects us. It confuses us, and it makes us understand that indeed we are very complex individuals. There are multiple layers in us, and some of them are more visible and tangible, some less visible and less tangible to us. And if you think back in time 10, 20 years, you definitely see that you have changed. Maybe the core is somehow there, but what has happened around the core, and then I refer to identifications. What kind of identifications do you have? What kind of identifications do you get through your belongings to different groups? Can be through hobbies, families, friends, political affiliations, religious affiliations, etc. And also through your profession. How do you identify yourself professionally? Or how do you identify yourself in relation to your own country or region? So this territorial identification, and many more. So I suppose this is pretty familiar to you. But then again, I mean, our belongings, of course we want to belong to groups with whom we share a common understanding or ideology or some common purpose, that it gives us meaning, and that's an in-group, whereas the rest is then the out-group. It was Eva who said here that, no, it was Rosie who spoke about we and they. So we have our in-groups, the we relations, and then we have the out-groups that often are they or them. And still we should maybe occasionally interact with different groups, whether they are in groups or not. Oh, let me see what I want to highlight from here. Yes, I mean, in the middle, this developmental resource, how do we relate to that? I mean, how well do we know ourselves, our identifications, belongings? How well do we function in our daily life? Human agency, self-efficacy, resilience are definitely issues linked to this. And the better we know ourselves, the better we can utilize our identity in professional contexts, in private contexts, in any contexts. And that way we can be of better support to our clients as well. But if we are constantly confused with ourselves, of course, it's difficult to help anybody else either. So this goes without saying. And here I just highlight some results. One of my research questions to those 20 staff members working for these EU institutions was, how do you relate to feeling European? And I don't know what I had expected, but I had expected maybe more personal insights into this question, being or feeling European, than what I got from those interviewees. They started parroting, let's say, I mean, talking like a parrot, repeating the official EU agenda somehow. Talking about the European Union values, democracy, rule of law, human rights, freedom of speech, all important things. And this is also exactly what the European Union tries to communicate to us. And of course, these values, for the time being, are somewhat challenged and contested by some countries. But also, European Union symbols, the EU flag, the passports, the burgundy-colored passports we have, and Euro, of course, those were mentioned, and then EU initiatives such as the Erasmus program. So they repeated more or less what EU is trying to communicate, but they did not really go that deep to reflect on their own experience, and this was a little bit surprising to me, as I had hoped that they would really start sharing some views. But of course, as a whole, they are a heterogeneous group of experts, but also at the same time, when we then address the territorial identifications, European versus national, so then they felt maybe more European than national, so their national identity wasn't that strong. Of course, many of them had been working for a long time already for the European Union institutions, or been working in the European, on the European level, so this definitely has influenced them. So you become a product of the environment where you are. National stereotypes, they are alive. So labeling other nationalities with negative, neutral, or sometimes even positive arguments or notions happens. But we should also bear in mind that those who work for the European Union institutions, they represent the European Union there. They are not representing their own countries. Somebody from Finland does not represent Finland there. And this is also then maybe something that was reflected in their answers, that they recognized the national stereotypes, but in the workplace, they always act as professionals. So, okay, maybe this was a little bit embellished. I don't know, because we will get to see something later on. But here, some of you may have seen this map of Europe. It's a young Slovak man who has created it. And they are definitely the worst stereotypes or stereotyped labels can be seen. This is a little bit of provocation to you. Yeah, I'm not going to touch upon any of them. But indeed, what I said at the beginning, that if we talk about individuals and focus on individuals, then we should really forget about stereotypes or generalizations. If we have somebody from Somalia or somebody from Afghanistan or Syria or whatever country, then we should that person tell us how he or she defines him or herself, and not instantly think that the image I have of a country or a group of people is correct. But like I said, you will get these slides so you can get amused, or they are easily found on the internet as well, so you can find also some very funny for India and China and Russia, etc. So, and the USA is also there. Interculturality. So here, I would only like to say that it's very much about human encounters, interaction, communication, coexistence, active coexistence together. And also, we should not think in terms of, hey, this is an intercultural environment, but really, again, focus on the individual and let him or her speak. Okay, I'm running out of time, so I will go on. So basically what I would say is that you as professionals or individuals, whatever your human capital is, meeting somebody from another country or from a different environment, it's not that you need to know a lot about the person in advance or the country where this person comes from or his background. Let the person talk to you, and he might be interested in you. So share, and don't start by telling that in our country things are done like this. You can learn both ways. It's easier said than done, I know, but it's worth trying out. Here were just some things. Okay, the middle one, communication styles across nations or nationalities. So of course we are individuals also in terms of how we communicate. But there are some differences across countries. Some countries tend to be a little bit more straightforward. Some go roundabout. Some, again, may be overly polite, and it may sometimes be difficult to interpret what's behind that politeness. So it's sometimes just making you confused because you don't really, how would I say, you don't manage to crack the code of the other person and how he or she is communicating, but continue communicating. And the final point on this slide, risk of losing oneself. And this is something maybe for you really to consider about that. I understand that you have to be very sensitive towards your clients, but if you try to accommodate to every single need and expectation and demand, etc., there is a risk that you start losing yourself, that you get lost with yourself. No matter how strong your identity or identifications would be, if you meet during 1 week many people and you adapt to them, that you are the chameleon, that you try to adapt well, but the risk of that is that you also may start losing yourself. So watch out. And I only show you this one quotation here. There, the person, a female in her early 50s, who first worked for the European Commission and then was working at the time of the interview at this Eurofound agency in Ireland, said that she gets really annoyed when certain country people, that people from one country, that they stick together in a multinational environment, even if it's only to eat lunch together. But then you feel like an outsider, that you are part of the working community, but then all of a sudden you see that there is a clique of certain people, either sharing the language or being from one country, let's say. So this is about being sensitive then to the others. Okay, we know these things happen very easily. I wrote a very short text about my doctoral thesis and published it on LinkedIn. In case you are on LinkedIn, you may go read it. And also, as this event is about networking, so if you would like to get connected with me on LinkedIn, send me an invitation there, and I'm happy to accept you to my network. But this is, of course, on a voluntary basis. So, thank you so much for your attention. This was very streamlined and simplified, and I couldn't really go that much into detail, but I hope you got an overview of what I have been working on in the past few years. And as Christmas is approaching, I take this opportunity to wish you a very pleasant pre-Christmas time. And when Christmas arrives, then happy holidays. Yeah, thank you so much.